Chapter 1. I was just a normal teenage girl. I loved beautiful clothes and loud music, long telephone conversations, and sleepy summer evenings. Most of all, I loved cookies and boys. My favorite cookies were chocolate chip with milk. You've got to have milk to have cookies. That's what I always said. My favorite boys, well, actually, I had only one favorite boy. His name was Christopher. My name is Rela. I just used to have to think Chris and Rela to get goosebumps, hoping that we would one day be together. Now, when I think of us, I feel a lot different. Sad, very sad. But there is beauty in sorrow. I realize that now. Someone I knew well once said, if there was no sorrow in the world, there would be no compassion. That's how I feel as I begin this tale, filled with love for all the people of the world. My people. How fragile we all are. Time has a permanent hold on us the moment we're born. It allows us to grow, to get big. We go to school, we find jobs, we fall in love, get married, and have children. Time lets us do all these things, but then, in the end, it kills us. Time is like a friend, but only for a time. You see, I don't have a lot of time to tell this story. My old friend has come for me. This time, it's my time. I will begin then. I wanted to buy a VCR. My father didn't own one. We had to be the only family in Los Angeles that didn't have a machine, and the lack was particularly distressing to me because I loved movies so much. Honestly, on a Saturday or Sunday, I could go to 3 movies in a row and not get tired. I had no taste and could watch anything, even low-budget sci-fi films with no story and cheesy special effects. Anything sci-fi sent me straight to technological heaven, as long as I had popcorn. Cookies, boys, movies, and popcorn. What a life. Anyway, I wanted to buy a VCR, but I had only $200 to spend. I had saved the money from my after-school job at our local library, 3 to 9, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Friends at school had told me Circuit City had good prices and a wide selection, so I went there. It was Thursday afternoon, and I had just got out of my art class, where I had been working on a brilliant sculpture of my own head. What vanity, I know, but I was having fun. A handsome young salesman practically jumped me when I entered the store. I didn't mind because I needed advice on what to buy. The guy was blonde and tan with bulging muscles that looked like they'd been injected. He was about 20 easy California living years old. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I want to buy a VCR." He gestured to a shelf of VCRs over his shoulder. A glance at the prices made me nervous. Nothing under $300. "We've got a wide selection," he said. "Do you know what you're looking for?" "Something good and cheap." He was amused. "How cheap?" $200. "You're going to have to spend more than that to get something good." "It's all I've got." "Do you have plastic?" "A credit card?" "Yes." "No," I said. I only have a leather purse with 10 20s in it. That's all I've got in all the world." He chuckled. "Another one of our poor homeless. We get them in all the time wanting to buy sophisticated electronic equipment." He turned. "Let's find you a VCR you like. Then you can worry about paying for it." In the next 5 minutes, Ed, he had on a name tag, explained why he preferred certain brands over others and why $200 wasn't going to cut it. Yet as we wandered down the aisle, I spotted a couple of machines on sale for less than $200. Ed said I didn't want one of them because they had only 2 heads and I wanted 4. "With only 2 heads, you have horrible quality when you switch to slow motion," Ed said. "Why would I ever switch to slow motion?" I asked. "I just want to be able to rent movies and watch them." "Have you seen Lethal Weapon? The first one?" "I don't think so." "You must have seen it. When it came out on video, it was the hottest movie in the country among women. The reason is because there's a scene near the beginning where Mel Gibson walks across the room butt naked. Now, you've got to have slow motion to fully enjoy that scene. If you have only 2 heads on your VCR and you watch that movie, you'll probably break your blasted machine." I must have looked somewhat incredulous. "I'm not going to risk ruining my VCR just to look at Mel Gibson's butt," I said. "What's your name?" Ed asked suddenly. "Rela." "What kind of name is that?" "A beautiful one. What kind of name is Ed?" "How old are you?" 18. "Do I need a license to operate all 4 heads?" He laughed. "It depends on what you're trying to slow down with all those heads. Look, I like you, Rela. I want to give you a deal. If you spend a little more than you want, you'll thank me later." I appraised him closely. "When am I going to see you later, Ed?" That caught him by surprise. He took a step back and scratched his head through his short hair. "Well, I wouldn't mind seeing you later, Rela. What's your number?" "Are you asking me out?" "Yeah, you sound surprised." "I am." "Why?" "You hardly know me. You just met me." Ed shrugged. "I hardly know any of my customers. In fact, I prefer it that way. But you're cute. What are you doing Saturday night?" "I'm having a party at my house. That's why I want to buy the VCR, so I can show a couple movies." I paused. "But you can't come to the party." "Why not?" I hesitated. My boyfriend's going to be there." "You have a boyfriend?" "Yeah." Now you sound surprised." "I'm not, actually. I told you, you're cute. I do want to go out with you. Maybe Sunday night. But how long have you known your boyfriend?" "Not long. Actually, he's just a guy I like a lot." Ed waved his hand. "He sounds like a jerk. Let's go to a movie Sunday night. That way you won't have to rent one." I stopped and shook my head. "It's too bad I don't have 4 heads on top of my shoulders. Then maybe I could keep up with you. Let's get back to business, Ed. You were going to give me a deal and get me to pay more than I want to. How does this all work?" "Do you have a checking account?" "Yes, but that's where I got the $200 in my purse now. I only have $10 left in my account." Ed wasn't worried. "You can write us a post-dated check. I'll tell the manager I know you and that you're trustworthy." He reached out and put his hand on a black VCR. "This is a Pioneer. It's pretty popular, and I sell a lot of them. You get 4 heads. The machine's easy to program, and Pioneers seldom break down. Normally, we sell this model for $340, but I can give it to you for $280. "Do I get such a big discount because you want to go out with me?" Ed grinned. He wasn't a bad sort. "You get it because you have a beautiful name, Rela. That's reason enough." I bought the VCR. I didn't have to make good on my post-dated check for 60 days. I figured I'd be ahead of things by then. Ed asked me for my phone number as I was leaving the store. I just laughed. That can be the safest response sometimes. I didn't laugh when he asked me for my driver's license so he could write the number down on the back of the check. I knew it was his job to ask. I lowered my head and told him I didn't have it with me. He said fine. I was happy driving home with my new toy beside me on the front seat. I kept looking at it, thinking of all the movies I was going to be able to watch. Next, I thought, I was going to have to buy an electric popcorn popper and get a boyfriend. I knew I had to call Christopher when I got home to invite him to my party. I had to give him some notice so he wouldn't make other plans. But I was too nervous to call right away, so I decided to dial my best friend, Stacy, instead. I had known Stacy for 3 months, since mid-July, when I came to Los Angeles to be with my father. I met her at a park. I went there to fly a kite, or rather to try to fly a kite. There wasn't much wind that day, and all my running up and down on the parched lawn wasn't getting my red paper diamond up into the sky. The day was hot, and I was sweating gallons. I think Stacy must have watched me for a while before approaching me and asking if I was out of my mind. It was a novel way to say hello, and I liked her right away for it. Stacy was one of those people who had no time lag between her brain and her tongue. She said exactly what was on her mind. Some people thought she was rude. They didn't know how sensitive she was. Yet, for all her straightforwardness, her wit was subtle. You had to be quick to catch it. Stacy was big-boned and had short, shiny, brown hair. She was always making fun of herself. Truly, though, she didn't do this to cover some unseen pain. Stacy was one of the happiest people I knew. She was 18, like me. The day I met her, she took in my situation, cut my kite tail in half, and had my kite flying high 5 minutes later. It was 4 in the afternoon when I spoke to Stacy. I hadn't unpacked my VCR yet. She called just as I picked up the phone to dial her. "Rela," she said, "do you walk around with the phone plugged into your belly button? You always get it on the first ring." "I'm telepathic," I said. "I always know when you're thinking of me." "Hey, I did it. You called Chris? Wow," she interrupted excitedly. Stacy also loved cookies and boys. One of the reasons she was chubby was that she loved donuts as well and could down a whole box without a single swallow of milk. She had no lack of boys calling her, though. They felt safe doing so, I suppose, since she went out with anybody who asked. She was a giving soul and by no means a virgin. "No," I said. "I bought a VCR." "Oh." She was disappointed. "You should call him. It's easier to ask a guy out over the phone, 'cause then he can't see your face. If he says no, you won't have to hide your disappointment." "I'm not asking him out. I'm just inviting him to my party. If he wants to go out with me, he's going to have to do the asking. Let me tell you about my VCR. It's got 4 heads. Oh, cool. You have slow motion? I wish we had slow motion. Last week, I watched the first Lethal Weapon, and I wanted to see—" "Don't say it," I interrupted. "It was $280. I had to give the guy a post-dated check for $80. "He let you? He must really have had the hots for you." "He did. He asked me out right there in the store. He wants to come to my party." "Did you tell him where and when?" "No. He was covered with bulging muscles. They almost looked fake." "If he has your check, he has your address," Stacy observed. Like I said, she was no fool. She went on. Did you tell him the party was this Saturday night? I did. If he comes, you can have him. Anyway, I can't call Christopher right now. Why not? I'll have a heart attack if he says no. He might say yes. There's only a 50-50 chance at best that he'll say yes. I don't want to die. I'm scared. God, this is ridiculous. Are you sure he's not seeing anybody? Stacy paused. Well, I didn't want to tell you this, but I have seen him talking to Debbie Ralston at lunch a few days in a row. Debbie Ralston? God, she's a fox. I hate her. Why does he like her? He was just talking to her. That doesn't mean he likes her. I talk to my brother's old dog all the time, and it stinks. Debbie does not smell like old dog, I grumbled. I'm not going to call him. Rela, Stacy, what? Nothing. I've got to go. My dad's going to be home in an hour, and I want to fix him a feast. Stella laughed. You have to ask Chris out tomorrow at school. You won't have any peace until you do. I suppose. What are you going to make for your dad? I don't know. Something good. You never told me where you learned to cook. It's just something I picked up over the years, I said. There were 2 TVs in our house, one in the living room, the other in my bedroom. When I bought the VCR, I intended to put it in the living room so that my dad could enjoy it too. I took it out of the box in my bedroom, though, because I wanted to have privacy while I learned to use it. I read the instruction manual while I darted between my bedroom and the kitchen. There was fish in the freezer. I decided to cook that instead of the pasta I had been planning. The VCR instruction booklet was easy to follow. Technology was really dancing forward, I thought, as I set the machine to record a movie that was supposed to be on HBO late Friday night. Actually, super early Saturday morning, at 3 a.m. Each entry I made flashed on the screen. The film I was taping was an old sci-fi horror flick that I had seen as a kid. It was called It, The Terror from Beyond Space. It was about a space expedition to Mars that had the misfortune of taking aboard an alien monster that had an insatiable craving for human flesh. I remembered how terrified I had been as a kid when several of the crew members were fleeing from the monster and the thing grabbed one of them by the leg. All you heard while the camera focused on sweat running down the guys' pals' faces was horrible screaming. Help me! Please, God, somebody help me! That movie gave me nightmares for months. I loved it. I figured it would spice up my party if things got dull. Since the movie was to come on at 3 in the morning, I was thankful there were such things as microchips with memories. Memories. Later, did I remember making a mistake programming the machine? No, I didn't. I really didn't. Even now, I don't think I did. It's all a mystery. I left the VCR in my bedroom for the time being. My father came home at 5:45. His name was the Reverend Spencer Lindquist. He wasn't my real father. I was adopted. Spence was the minister at a Methodist church a mile from our house. He was a modern-day saint, and I don't say that just because he took care of me. He worked with the homeless. He spent hours every day trying to find places for them to sleep. He had also started a successful program in LA called Food for Thought. Leftovers were collected from restaurants and supermarkets and hotels and distributed to the needy. His organization had a half-dozen minivans circulating through all parts of the city. Keeping everything moving and attending to his own church exhausted Spence. He was 45 but looked 10 years older. His hair was already white, and he had a terrible slouch and an irregular heartbeat. But he seemed to thrive on the love and thanks he received from those he helped. I couldn't have chosen a better father. "I smell something fishy," he said as he came into the house. I gave him a big kiss on the cheek, as always. He sat down at the table to eat, and I talked about my purchase. I told him the VCR had only cost $180. Of course, I was lying, but I figured it was only a little white lie and that God would forgive me. How often from that day on did I have to hope God would forgive me? Chapter 2. Dear Chris, I love you. I want you. Do you want me? What? You don't know who I am? I'm the cute brunette who sits 2 seats behind you on your right in calculus. My eyes are brown and they light up when I look at you. I can see you right now as I scribble out this note. I wish you would turn to look at me. I really am kind of cute, and I don't mean to sound conceited or anything. I'm on the short side, but my body is your most wonderful dream. My nose is a button. My smile is a bar of white chocolate. Do you like chocolate, Chris? I like it in cookies. I love you, I think, even though I don't know you. Maybe it's better this way. No, on second thought, I don't think so. Chris, I feel I have to know you. I feel that if we pass by each other without becoming lovers, my life will have been wasted. But I don't want you to think I just want your body. You're brilliant. I want to eat your brains. No, yuck, that's gross. I didn't mean that. I've been watching too many horror films lately. I'm taping one for a party I'm having tomorrow. Would you like to come to my party? The only reason I'm throwing it is so I'll have an excuse to invite you to my house. Chris, Chris, Chris. I keep thinking your name and thinking that you must be able to hear me thinking, and that you must know how much I love you. But how can you know when I'm afraid to tell you how perfect you are? The moment I first saw you, I silently hid my heart in a golden box to save for you on the day you turned to me and smiled. I wanted you to hold it in your hands. I am so sentimental about you. I'm making myself sick. Still, I can't help thinking your name. Chris, Christopher Perry, Chris and Rela. I bet you don't even know my last name. I can't remember it myself. Maybe I have the same last name as you. Maybe I will. Rela Perry. I've heard it somewhere before. I swear it. Let me tell you how I see you. Today you are wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt. Do you ever wear anything else? I don't mean to be critical. I accept you as you are, but I would love to buy you new clothes to show off your beautiful dark eyes. Do you know I see the night sky when I stare into your eyes? Even from the other side of the courtyard at lunch, I can see the moon and the stars in them. New clothes would also flatter your dark hair, your strong profile. I mainly watch you from the side. You understand because we are not on face-to-face terms yet. What will I say to you when I do finally talk to you? Your mind is so vast, like the ocean. I feel I could drown in it before I could get my bearings. Yeah, I know, I also do well in school, but you have imagination. That's the other thing I can see in your eyes, that you will be great, that the world will remember you long after the rest of us have turned to dust. What does a genius need with a girl like me, other than to hold and cuddle and love until the wind comes to blow the dust away?
Rela?
Mr. Tudor said. Here, I said, hastily sliding my letter under a piece of scrap paper. I raised my eyes to Mr. Tudor, who was standing beside me with our calculus tests in his hand. 2 seats up and on my left, Christopher Perry turned to see what was going on. Such an alert face. He had a higher IQ asleep than most of us had awake. He already had his test. He smiled briefly at me, and I was momentarily hypnotized.
I know you're here,
Mr. Tudor said pleasantly. He laid a test paper on my desk in front of me.
Catching up on your letter writing?
Christopher turned back to face front, breaking the spell. Yes, sir, I mumbled. I suspected Mr. Tudor had glanced at my letter before he spoke, and maybe he had seen Christopher's name.
Good luck on your test, he said, even though you don't need it.
Thank you, sir. Since I was a straight-A student, I was getting an A in calculus. I thought it must have been in my genes. I always did well in math. The test consisted of 6 integral problems. I completed them in 30 minutes, about the same time it took for Christopher to finish. I knew I did each one correctly. I sat staring at him while I waited for the class to end. I was slowly marshaling my courage to ask him to my party. Be cool, I kept thinking. Act like it's no big deal, but at the same time make him feel that he's wanted. And, above all else, don't burst into tears if he says he's busy. Mr. Tudor finally collected our tests, and the bell rang. I gathered up my books and followed Christopher into the hall. He was alone, for the moment, but I knew I had to move fast. I pulled up on his left side without looking at him. I hoped he'd glance over at me and start a conversation. We were not total strangers. We had talked maybe 10 times, probably on an average of 5 minutes each time. I didn't have to wait long for him to speak.
The test was a piece of cake, wasn't it?
He said. I blushed. It was sweet and sentimental of him to speak of cake, which was very sweet, while talking to me. I knew I had it bad for this guy if I was inventing such comparisons, maybe even to the point of insanity. For you, maybe, I said. He wasn't fooled.
You finished sooner than I did, Rela. You always do.
He said my name, I thought. How auspicious. I have to study hard, I lied. Actually, I never studied. I hardly ever had to look at the textbook. It was enough for me to listen to Mr. Tudor.
What do you have next period?
He asked. History with Palos.
Do you like him?
He's a nice guy, but I think he makes up history as he goes along. Christopher raised an eyebrow.
What makes you say that?
I didn't know why I had said it. It just seemed true. Often the words that came out of my mouth surprised me. I smiled and shrugged. I guess I'm just disappointed that Atlantis and Lemuria aren't discussed in his class. Christopher frowned.
I've heard of Atlantis, but what was Lemuria?
Another mythical continent from the past. It was supposed to have been where the Pacific Ocean is now.
You must tell me about it sometime.
He paused.
I heard you're having a party Saturday night.
Oh? Ah, heart failure was near. Who told you?
Stacy. She said it'd be all right if I dropped by, but I wanted to clear it with you first.
I coughed. You can drop by. You can drop by any time you want. That night, I mean. That'd be great.
I was wondering if I could bring a friend.
Oh, my poor heart. Bursting with joy one moment, just bursting the next. Yeah, I said flatly. He glanced over at me.
Are you sure?
I swallowed thickly. Yeah. He smiled.
I've never been to your house. Where do you live?
His friend had devastated me. I couldn't think. Ask Stacy. She gives the best directions, I mumbled. He hesitated.
I'll do that, Rela. I'll see you there. Is 8 o'clock okay?
It's okay. Why did you tell him to come when you knew he was bringing a friend? I yelled at Stacy when I saw her at lunch. We were in the school parking lot. I'd had enough of education for the day. I was going home. That wasn't unusual for me. If I felt like ditching, I ditched. Often I'd drive down to the beach and walk alone along the shore. I loved the wind in my hair, the salt air in my nostrils. The sea always settled my mind. Of course, today there would be no stroll beside the waves. I had to go to work at the library at 3. He didn't say anything about a friend when I told him about the party, Stacy said. You had no right to tell him about the party in the first place. It was no business of yours. I thought I was doing you a favor. You were so scared, I thought you'd never ask him. I was not scared. I was just waiting for the right moment. I'm sorry. I sighed. Yeah. I wasn't really mad at Stacy. I was mad at myself for loving someone who obviously didn't love me. It was so frustrating. Why did I care so much about him when I didn't even know him? But that was precisely the point. Just what I had written in my letter to him. I did know him. I just didn't know how I knew him. It was cosmic, or else I was losing it. How do you know his friend is a girl? Stacy asked. Did you ask him? No, I didn't ask him. That wouldn't have been very subtle of me, would it? But he's bringing Debbie, I know it. She's cute, Stacy observed. Shut up. Stacy grinned. You're giving up without a fight. If he brings her, we'll spill something on her lap. We'll set her on fire. We'll accidentally drown her in the bathtub. We should drown him for bringing her, I said. We both laughed at the prospect, but the joke wasn't funny. Indeed, just the idea of Christopher being harmed filled me with inexplicable dread. Of course, that's not a mystery to me now. There were plenty of reasons why I should have worried about him. And I was one of them. Chapter 3. The memory of the dream didn't come to me until the next day when I was buying food at the store for my party. I had an orange in my right hand and was squeezing it to see if it was ripe when a strange image flickered inside my mind. The picture itself was suffused with a soft orange glow. Perhaps it was the color of the fruit that triggered the memory. There were objects of other colors in the scene, too. There was a gray reclining chair that reminded me of a dentist's chair because it was surrounded by tubes and pipes. Beside the chair was a squat blue machine that somehow resembled a computer. The chair was partially covered with white sheets, which may have been made of paper. Moving figures flickered at the edge of the scene, but they were hard to distinguish because the orange light shimmered there like fog pierced by the rays of the setting sun. The people, I had to assume they were people, were only clumsy shadows in my mind. They seemed to be carrying something toward the chair. It could have been a person. But as they moved toward the center of the picture, the whole scene began to fade inside my head. I blinked and focused on the orange in my hand. Wow, I whispered. Where had those images come from? Then I remembered I had not slept well the night before, that I had spent hours tossing and turning and getting up to go to the bathroom when I didn't really have to go. Those same images had been part of a dream I'd had, one that had gone on despite my frequent periods of wakefulness. What surprised me was that I hadn't remembered the dream immediately after I woke up, as I would have expected. But perhaps I had subconsciously blocked it from my memory, temporarily. The dream had been more of a nightmare, I remembered now. A shiver went through me from head to toe. The shadowy figures had been carrying a dead body toward the chair. I put the orange down and steered my cart out of the produce section. I wouldn't have a fruit salad at the party, after all, I decided. I didn't have time to worry about dreams. I had personally invited 4 dozen people to my party, and God only knew how many others Stacy had asked. I had a list of essentials that I had to buy, and my dad's checkbook in my back pocket to pay for them. He had graciously offered to pay for all the food, which was a good thing considering that I had spent every penny I had on the VCR. I hadn't checked to see if the VCR had taped my horror movie, but I assumed that it had. At the top of my grocery list were cookies and milk, naturally, but I picked up a ton of cold cuts and bread as well. I may have been a wonderful cook, but I had never prepared a hot meal for a huge group of people, and I wasn't about to start. Sandwiches were always appreciated, I thought. I had to return to the produce section to get tomatoes and lettuce and cucumbers. I tried not to look over at the oranges. I went home with my groceries and started cleaning up the house. My father was at the church and had promised I could have the house to myself for the night. He was going to sleep at an associate's place. I was hoping that some of the girls from school would want to sleep over and that the party would turn into a slumber party. Except for Stacy, I had no close friends at school. But then, I hadn't lived in the area long. Stacy arrived at 4 to help. She brought 2 vases of flowers and some Halloween decorations, although Halloween was still a couple weeks away. She festooned the living room with long, spiraling orange and black streamers, and even carved a pumpkin and put a candle inside it. Stacy thought I had made a mistake not having the party a week later and making it a costume party. But I had purposely chosen to avoid competing with the rash of parties that would begin the following weekend. At 7:30, people began to arrive. I dashed upstairs to change. Actually, I didn't have a lot of clothes to choose from. I settled on a pair of black pants and an orange blouse, in keeping with the season. When I returned downstairs, I found that Stacy was letting people in by the carload. I began to relax. I had been afraid that no one would show up. Yet I didn't relax so much that my attention wasn't riveted on the door every time someone new arrived. Where was Christopher? I asked myself. What would Debbie be wearing? I had a general plan for the night. First, I was going to let people eat and drink and listen to music and mingle. A few people had brought beer, but since I was living in a minister's house, I had decided to turn the other cheek and limit myself to a couple of cans. Then later, I was going to have a few organized games, like charades and Trivial Pursuit. I had also bought a tape of old TV theme songs. The object of that game would be to listen to it and identify the program the particular song had come from. Then I was going to put on a movie, maybe the one I had taped, maybe Stacy's copy of the first Lethal Weapon, what she had so thoughtfully remembered to bring. It was close to 9 when Christopher came to the front door with Debbie in tow. Debbie was stunning in a short, tight black dress, her blonde hair all over the place, her lips on fire from her bright red lipstick. Christopher had on his usual jeans and t-shirt, but was still the object of all my desires. I greeted them with a wonderfully winning smile and told myself that they seemed happy together. I told them there was food in the kitchen and then ran upstairs to blow my nose and wipe my eyes. But I wasn't devastated. I had been forewarned and life went on. And even though she was cute as pie, I knew Debbie couldn't count the number of brain cells inside her skull on her 2 hands, even if one of the hands held a pocket calculator. I next played the tape of old TV show theme songs. Everybody took an index card and a pen and wrote down the name of the show the theme song came from. Naturally, the person who identified the most songs would be the winner. Now, I had never listened to the tape before I put it on, and I hadn't glanced at the card inside the cassette box that listed the TV shows. But as I listened to the songs, I knew every one of them. Immediately. I hadn't realized I'd watched so much TV growing up. There was Bewitched and Star Trek and The Lucy Show. It was like a nostalgia trip. But I knew I couldn't win my own game at my own party. People would be suspicious. So I set my card aside when people started to read off their choices. There were 30 songs on the tape. Stacy got 25 correct. The highest score. Christopher, even with Debbie's help, I hadn't said that was allowed, got only 10 right. He said he hadn't watched a lot of TV growing up. But it was Christopher who, just as Stacy was taking her bows, insisted that I reveal how I had done. In fact, he snatched up my card, and his eyes widened when he saw what I had written. "Hey," he told everybody, "Rela got them all right." "Did you really?" Stacy asked. "Well," I said. "You cheated," Stacy said. "No," I said. "Had you listened to the tape before?" Christopher asked. "No," I said. "I just bought it today." I glared at Stacy. I didn't study the paper that came with the cassette either. "How come you didn't tell us you had them all right?" Christopher asked. He was sitting on the couch beside Debbie, who, I had learned, was also new to the area. He was so close, his outstretched feet kept bumping into mine. Debbie was staying near him, but was not kissing him or anything that would make me want to vomit in her face. I lowered my head at his question. "I don't like to show off the fact that I spent my formative years in front of the boob tube," I said. "She cheated," Stacy said again. "I deserve the prize. What is it, Rela?" I looked over at her. "You get to keep the tape," I said. We went on to charades. Busy with restocking the food, I couldn't play. I was chopping carrot sticks in the kitchen by myself when Christopher walked in. He had a can of beer in his hand, but appeared completely sober. I smiled quickly at him, but it felt strained. "Looking for the restroom?" I asked. "No." He set his beer down on the countertop and settled himself on a stool near me. "I haven't drunk that much. How are you doing, Rela?" I kept the smile plastered on my face. Oh, I'm just singing in the rain, waiting for it to snow. Are you enjoying the party?
It's a great party.
You don't like charades? He shrugged.
It's all right, but I wanted a chance to talk to you alone.
What?
I feel like I never talked to you at school. We're always just passing in the halls.
I forced a laugh. It's hard for a girl to get near you when you're surrounded by women like Debbie. He was puzzled.
Debbie's my cousin.
Really? I gushed, my bayonet-sized vegetable chopping knife in my hand. I didn't know that. Wow, that's great. I mean, having such a beautiful cousin. He regarded me strangely.
What made you want to throw a party?
I wanted to meet more people at school. I just moved here this summer.
Where did you move from?
I hesitated. I always hated to talk about my past. Back east.
Are you here with your parents?
Yes, my father. I don't have a mother. It's a long story. How about Debbie? Where's she from?
Wisconsin. She just got here last summer.
That's when I got here. What a coincidence. Christopher grinned.
You're funny, Rela.
I chuckled. Yeah, I'm hilarious. People die of laughter around me all the time. Hey, I heard that you're applying to Caltech. He nodded.
I am, but I'm not sure if I'll get in.
You? They'll roll out the red carpet for you. You have a straight A average, don't you? I even heard they've already offered you a scholarship.
That's far from definite.
What are you going to major in, if you do get in?
I hope to have a double major in physics and computer science.
That's quite a stretch.
It might be a lot of work, but I don't see the two subjects as dissimilar. If you think about it, much of our subatomic research is already carried out with the help of computers. That will just increase in the future. We have a new generation of computers every 10 years. Did you know that scientists at IBM are experimenting with the use of crystals to store data? I just read about it in Scientific American. In one stroke, we'll be able to access data 5,000 times quicker.
That's amazing, I said.
The whole field of computers is exploding. You know how logical processors work now in the serial system? That's where you have all code and binary arrangement. A switch is either on or off. Well, now fuzzy logic is being developed. That's where you have a third choice at the fundamental level of the system. Something is not simply yes or no. It can be maybe.
I smiled. Maybe what? I wanted to encourage him to talk, since he had never really talked to me before for any length of time. Yet I wished he'd change the subject. For all my prowess in mathematics, I had never been comfortable with computers.
Maybe anything, Christopher said. A thinking machine could be the result of this third choice. It really excites me.
He looked at me shrewdly.
But it doesn't excite you, does it?
I wouldn't say that. I'd say, rather, that it worries me.
What? Why, specifically?
I worry that we'll become so dependent on computers that we'll cease to think for ourselves. We'll lose our humanity.
You honestly believe that?
I do. He chuckled.
You've been watching too many Terminator movies. A computer doesn't know anything until it's programmed. Even then, it's not conscious.
They say it got smart.
Pardon?
It's my favorite line from the first Terminator movie. Maybe it was that line that made me start to worry. I'm a very impressionable young lady. Christopher nodded.
Possibly a machine could become smart, but we'd always know where the off switch was. Anyway, I appreciate your point of view. I'm not the cold young scientist that I appear to be. I'd like to minor in psychology on top of everything else. The human mind fascinates me. Did you know that I have a biofeedback machine in my bedroom? I use it to get into a deep state of alpha. I'd like to show it to you sometime.
Maybe it was the invitation to go to his bedroom that distracted me. Whatever the distraction, I accidentally let my left ring finger stray into the path of the blade as I sliced carrots. The stainless steel cut me almost to the bone before I felt it. A thin film of blood sprayed over my nicely cut carrots. I dropped the knife and raised the wounded finger to my lips. Then I felt the pain. It's amazing how much a bad cut feels like a burn. The coppery taste of blood filled my mouth. Christopher was off his seat and by my side in a second. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Oh," I groaned with the finger still in my mouth. This was no tiny nick. The blood was leaking out the sides of my lips and dropping onto my orange blouse. At least, I thought, I would die in his arms. "Did you cut the finger off?" he asked anxiously. I had spooked him, for sure. He was white. "I don't know," I mumbled, lying. "Check all the carrot sticks to see if one has a ring on it." Christopher shook his head, not amused by my humor. He reached out to help me, and I noticed his fingers were shaking. "I'm taking you to the hospital," he said. "No." I took the finger away from my mouth, and the blood dripped onto the cutting board. "It's my party, and I can bleed if I want to." "Would you stop joking, Rela? You're really bleeding." He was upset, and I felt bad for making him feel worse. For my part, I was calm. The sight of blood didn't really bother me. I grabbed a small dish towel and wrapped it around the wound. Red blossomed in a circle on the white material. I put pressure on the cut, which wasn't easy to do. The sight of blood might not have bothered me, but the pain of the cut did. "I'll be all right in a few minutes," I said. "The bleeding is slowing." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes." "I still want to take you to the hospital," Christopher said. I was touched by his concern, but puzzled at the strength of his reaction. After all, I had cut my finger, not my throat. He continued to breathe rapidly. I smiled to reassure him. "I'm not going to die, Christopher," I said gently. He sat back down on his stool and lowered his head. "People are so fragile," he muttered. I felt such love for him in that moment. It swept over me like a warm wave. Yet, and this was odd, his comment also bothered me. I didn't know why. "This people is not so fragile," I said, meeting his gaze. He held my eyes a moment before lowering his head as if embarrassed. "You should get stitches," he said. "I'll put a bandage on it. I'll be fine." "When did you last get a tetanus shot?" I laughed. "I'm not going to get tetanus. Relax." Just then, Ed of Circuit City fame poked his head in through the kitchen door. He had on a tie, and his shirt was straining against his muscles. He looked as if he had just come from work. He made a face when he saw all the blood. "Having a little argument with your boyfriend, I see," he said. "Hi, Ed," I said. "No, I just cut my finger. Come in and get something to eat. Just don't sample the carrots. Christopher, this is Ed. He sold me my VCR." Ed came in and shook Christopher's hand. "So, you're Rela's guy," Ed said. "You don't know how lucky you are to have such a devoted woman. I used every one of my high-powered lines on this girl, and still she wouldn't go out with me. Can you imagine that? Turning down Eddie Farmer?" Christopher took back his hand and put it in his pocket. Ed had obviously enjoyed crushing it. "That's the trouble with high-powered lines," Christopher said casually. "They sometimes give off a lot of static." Ed took a step back. "You sound like Rela." "That's because he's not my boyfriend," I said. "He's my cousin." Christopher glanced at me, amused. Ed was confused. "Is your boyfriend here?" he asked. "I don't have one," I said. "That was just a line of mine to keep you from hitting on me.
But I told Stacy about you, and she's more than available. Ed brightened. Is she that babe who let me in? Probably. Grab some food and go talk to her. We're going to put on a movie that I recorded with the VCR you sold me. I groaned involuntarily. The towel I had wrapped around my finger was getting no bloodier, but the finger was beginning to throb now. This one's going to keep me awake. You should take some aspirin, Christopher said, still concerned. I decided right then that he could not be present at the birth of our first child. He'd just faint. I had already decided I was going to marry him. Despite my physical pain, I was happy that he was showing interest in me. I can't, I said. I'm allergic to them. They do funny things to me. Ed popped open a can of Kurs and grabbed a sandwich. Beer does the same thing to my head, he said, and burped. I went upstairs to take care of my finger. The cut was deep. I was worried it would scar and had second thoughts about Christopher's offer to go to an emergency room. Yet I decided I couldn't leave my party just when it was beginning to roll. I bandaged the finger as best I could and returned to my bedroom. I disconnected the VCR from my TV and carried it downstairs with the tape inside. Stacy and Ed met me in the hall off the living room. Movie time, I said. Ed tells me you cut off your finger, Stacy said. I was just trying to get Christopher's attention, I said. I thought you said he was your cousin, Ed said. Debbie's Christopher's cousin, Stacy said. You knew that? I exclaimed. No, Stacy said. Debbie just told me. I'm getting confused, Ed protested. I brought the VCR into the living room and hollered for attention. I explained what our movie choices were, and the majority voted to watch it. Handicapped as I was, I let Christopher hook the VCR up to the TV, which took him about 10 seconds. He rewound the tape to the beginning and came over and sat beside me on the couch. Debbie was in the kitchen, or the bathroom maybe, forgotten. My finger pulsed with pain to the pulse of my heart, but I felt content for the first time in a while. That feeling wasn't to last long. The movie wasn't at the beginning of the tape, as it should have been. Instead, there was news. I wouldn't have been that surprised if it had been the end of a news program. It was always possible, I thought, especially late at night, that the program preceding the movie could have run a few minutes over. But clearly the news was just beginning. I jumped up to turn it off. I must have programmed in the wrong date, I said, reaching for the stop button. I didn't have the remote on me. Wait, Christopher said. You may have just missed the movie. Give it a few minutes. No, I said. I hit the stop button on the VCR. The TV screen filled with static. I did it wrong. Are you sure? Ed asked. I'm sure, I said. Why don't we fast forward it a few minutes to check it out? Stacy suggested, sitting on the floor beside Ed. I said I'm sure, I snapped, suddenly impatient. Rela, Stacy said. I took a deep breath. We'll watch your movie, Stacy, or else I can run out and rent a couple of movies. Okay? Can we just drop it? The whole group was staring at me strangely. Christopher stood. I wouldn't mind driving over to Blockbuster with you, Rela, he said. We can watch the news until you return, Ed said. That would be too boring, I said, leaning over and pushing the eject button. The tape slid into my hand. We'll be back in 15 minutes. As Christopher and I were leaving the house, I heard Stacy say, I think Rela accidentally recorded a skin flick and knows it. The Blockbuster video outlet was just down the street from my house. My nerves were on edge as I got in Christopher's car for the short hop. He couldn't help but notice my discomfort. I wouldn't be embarrassed, he said. I often make a mistake programming my VCR. You said yourself it was a new machine. I remember how easily he'd set up the VCR,
even with the complexity of the cable box. I don't think you make many mistakes.
Is your finger bothering you?
No, I'm fine, really, I lied. My hands trembled, and I clasped them together in my lap. What was wrong? I wondered. I hadn't wanted to watch it that much. I decided being close to Christopher was intimidating me more than I realized. This is a nice car, I remarked. What kind is it?
A Mazda 626.
Is it yours?
Yeah, I just bought it this summer.
Nice to have the money, I said.
I don't have it now, but I can make it back quick.
What do you do?
He chuckled. I fix VCRs, personal computers, stereos, TVs, anything electronic. I used to have to advertise to get business, but word of mouth is good now. A few regular technicians in the area bring me their stuff whenever they get backed up.
Wow, you've really earned your boy genius nickname.
No one calls me that.
They do behind your back.
Really?
Absolutely.
He smiled. You have a nickname too.
I don't believe it. No one at school knows me. What is it?
It doesn't matter, but everybody does talk about you.
What do they say? I asked.
I'm not going to tell you.
You have to tell me. Is it bad?
No, he said, but I'm still not going to tell you.
You're driving me crazy.
I thought you liked me.
I blinked. What made you think that, Mr. Christopher? He was taken aback by my serious tone.
I didn't mean anything by the remark. I just thought, that you didn't find me offensive.
That's true. It's true.
What's true?
It's all true. I wasn't going to tell him straight to his face that I liked him. I assumed he was pulling my leg when he said people talked about me. There was nothing to talk about, I thought. I should have realized that that was what people enjoyed gossiping about most.
How's your finger? He asked.
My state of mind is not dictated solely by my sore finger. I smiled sweetly to let him know I was kidding. You don't need to keep asking me that, Chris. He nodded to the video store up ahead.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed talking to you. We should talk some more sometime,
he said. I knew right then he wanted to ask me out. It went straight to my head. Yeah, but you know what they say.
What do they say?
He asked. Talk is cheap. He was perceptive. He knew in that moment that I knew of his secret desire for my luscious body.
Do you want to go out sometime? He asked.
No. I was horrible, simply awful. He seemed disappointed.
Oh.
I'm not allowed to date. My father, he's a minister, has taught me that boys are the straight road to hell. He frowned.
Really? Don't you think that's kind of extreme?
I shook my head. He told me that boys are only interested in one thing. Sex, sex, sex. It's only one thing, but he always says it 3 times, just so I won't forget. Chris was offended.
Not all boys are interested in just sex.
I acted surprised. Really?
Yeah.
I acted disappointed. Oh. Chris was confused, the poor boy.
Rela?
Yes?
Are you pulling my leg?
I giggled. I can't believe what I said next. The thought of the guy had terrified me the day before, and now I was verbally seducing him. No, but I'd like to pull on it, I exclaimed. Then, blushing like a tomato, I clapped my hand over my mouth. Christopher began to laugh softly.
Where should we go on our first date?
He asked. I removed my hand. Anywhere you want, Mr. Christopher. Chapter 4. The bed was not big enough for me and all the things in my dream. I could feel the sheets and blankets constraining me, even as I knelt in another room, in another place. Christopher was in my dream, too, sitting before a computer screen. I watched from nearby while he pushed a button, and a fantastically complex map of the interior of a human brain flowed out. Together we journeyed along the pathways of the neurons, the synapses firing like miniature bolts of lightning in caves that had never seen the light of day. Caves of consciousness that could nevertheless imagine the sun of a galaxy a million light years away. Christopher spoke softly, clearly, yet I couldn't understand everything he said. The brain on the screen pulsed with blood, even as my own heart beat rapidly. The rhythm of the beat filled the room. Christopher was showing me the secrets of the universe. He had found them in the most surprising place of all, inside humankind, in the depths of souls. But somewhere in the journey, I felt I had lost my soul. The room with Christopher and the computer slowly faded and was replaced by a bedroom, sparsely furnished. I sat there on the edge of a chair before a small table on which lay a vial of green liquid and a brand new syringe. The green solution sparkled as I held it up to the light and stared into its depths, but not with life. It sparkled as a crystal in a computer circuit would. I knew somehow the solution had something to do with memory, but I didn't know if it stored it or wiped it clean. I stabbed the needle into the vial and drew out the solution. Then I slid the needle into a vein in my arm. As the green fluid poured into my blood, I felt it penetrate my heart, my soul, until all I knew of humanity was lost. Everything became gray, gray as a winter's sky that promised only bitter cold and frost. Then came a long interval when I floated, when I was carried through the air on impersonal currents of wind, or perhaps the even more indifferent arms of machines. I couldn't say which because I couldn't say what I was. Finally, I settled down and cold liquid swelled around me, over my legs and hips, across my chest and arms until it reached my face. Even here the liquid did not stop. It covered my face, smothering me and taking away my breath. Yet I didn't resist because I didn't have to breathe. I drank in the cold, became the cold. Time stopped and everything was black, black as death without meaning. I woke up stark naked in my bathtub. The water was turned on and was running cold and hard. It was bubbling over my lower lip. Another few seconds unconscious, and I would have drowned. I coughed and sat suddenly upright. The bathroom was dark, but I could see the goose flesh on my arms and legs. Rela, I whispered to myself, you had way too much to drink. Yet that wasn't true. I only drank 2 cans of beer. 2 cans shouldn't have sent me sleepwalking to the bathtub. I clearly remembered climbing into bed with my pajamas on. I didn't remember my dream clearly, not at first, only the green fluid and the long silver needle I had shoved into my vein. I shivered and climbed out of the tub. I noticed the light in my bedroom was on. Odd, I thought. A few minutes later, I was downstairs in the living room, dry with my blue polka dot pajamas on. I had gone downstairs to make myself a glass of warm milk, but settled onto the sofa in front of the TV instead. I had yet to put on a light, but could see the tape resting on top of the VCR clearly enough. The tape that was supposed to have It on it, the horror movie of my childhood, the source of so many of my nightmares. More of my dream came back to me then. I remembered Christopher staring deep into the human brain, the feeling I'd had watching him, that he could take me there with him, that I, too, could know the secrets of the universe. Weird, I muttered. Where did my subconscious get such ideas? I tried to push the dream aside, but I didn't get up and go into the kitchen. I continued to sit and stare at the tape. For the life of me, I couldn't understand how I had made a mistake programming the machine. The instructions had been simple enough, and I wasn't a fool. The only thing I could think of was that I had started with the wrong date. Perhaps there had been a news program on 24 hours earlier, and I had set it to record that instead of the movie. Checking such a hypothesis would be easy. I'd just have to look in the TV guide. Yet I didn't feel inclined to do so. I just kept staring at the tape in the dark, wondering why it scared me so. It's just the news, I said out loud. The news is not scary. It's always happening far away and to someone else. But this time, I felt like something was happening to me. I was cold still from my unplanned bath and keenly alert. In fact, it had to be 3 or 4 in the morning, and I didn't feel the least bit drowsy. My fear might have been keeping me awake, but I felt there was something else helping. I was excited, I realized. I was excited about the tape. But why? Slowly I rose from the couch and picked the tape up off the VCR. I had put it there after the last person to leave the party, Stacy, was safely out the door. Previous to that, I had quietly sat in the living room with my friends watching Them, an old sci-fi movie about gigantic killer ant-like creatures. Christopher had been the next to the last person to leave and had promised to call tomorrow. Life was good. Why was I getting so excited about a news tape then? Why not play it and quit talking to yourself? I said out loud. I slid the tape into the VCR. The machine practically snatched it out of my hand. After turning on the TV, I slowly backed away to sit on the couch. Just before the middle-aged male announcer came on the screen, I remembered more of my dream, the holographic map of the human brain. I wondered whose brain Christopher had chosen to map.
Good morning, people, the announcer began. Our top story today, in the Middle East, peace talks between the Arab and Jewish community.
The news droned on. There was nothing special about it. Fighting in Iraq, space shuttle unable to get a new satellite out of its cargo bay, more people out of work. I began to relax, to feel silly. I'd just thrown a wonderful party, had the guy of my dreams ask me out. Now it was the middle of night, and I was sitting on my couch watching a day-old news program. I should have been sleeping, dreaming of what was to happen next in my love life. Only how old was this news program? The announcer had moved on to sports. It was football season.
The Raiders looking good,
the man was saying.
21-17 over the Steelers. Down in Miami, the Dolphins suffered a real setback, losing to the last-place Patriots, 0-3. Up in Minnesota, the Vikings were incredible, crushing the Redskins 46-7.
As I was saying, it was football season. Naturally, the guy should have been talking about the games that day. Yet I was suddenly overwhelmed with an uneasy feeling. It took me a minute to pinpoint why. It was early Sunday morning. I knew football was played on both Saturday and Sunday, but college ball was usually played on Saturday. The pros played on Sunday. Yet this announcer was giving out the scores for professional teams, as if it were early Monday morning. I chuckled. So what? I said out loud to myself. I was fond of talking to myself. The scores are from last Sunday. Yeah, right, I thought, a tenth of a second later. The news announcer had nothing better to do than report last week's football scores and talk about the games as if they had just happened a few hours earlier. It was time I checked the TV guide. I didn't have to turn on the light as I flipped through it. The glow from the tube was sufficient to read by. In a moment, I found the page for Saturday. It was listed for October 15th, Saturday, 3 a.m. I traced the time slot back day by day, but didn't come to a news program in the time period until October 10th. There would be a news program on at 3 in the morning 2 days after it was supposed to have shown on October 17th. Indeed, there was a news show on every Monday at that hour. I set the program guide aside and searched for the paper we'd received Saturday morning. The date on it said October 15th. That made sense to me. That was the date I had programmed in when I had set the machine to record it. I knew for a fact I had put in the correct date because I had put it in with the movie schedule sitting on my lap. The date at present, because it was already Sunday, was October 16th. But I remembered I had not set the initial date when I'd had the movie schedule. I had done that earlier, right after taking the machine out of the box and plugging it in. Then I had run up and down between my bedroom and the kitchen while I cooked dinner for my father and completed the programming. Was it possible my initial date had been off by a few days? Easy to settle that. I squinted at the date in blue block characters on the upper right-hand corner of the VCR. It read October 18. There, I said aloud. That was my mistake. I was off by 2 days when I set the date. No worries. Now I can go to bed and dream of Christopher taking me to Paris in the jet he's built in his spare time. Oh, but hold on, little girl. Wait just 1 minute. Maybe wait a couple of days. I may have made a mistake, I realized, but so had the logical progression of the universe. I still shouldn't have been able to record the news 2 days in advance. So, what had happened? I had set the machine to record exactly 2 days after the time slot when it was supposed to be on. By chance, news was on then. By chance, I had recorded the news 2 days before the news was supposed to be on. Impossible, I whispered. It hit me then, and it hit me hard. I had recorded Monday morning's news. I had taped the future. Chapter 5. Late Sunday afternoon, I sat with my father and watched the Raiders play the Steelers. I was waiting for Christopher to come over to take me to dinner, and I wanted to see if I'd got a better deal on my VCR than I thought. Christopher had called me around noon to tell me where we were going. It was a restaurant down by the beach. Sounded romantic to me. He was supposed to pick me up at 5, but after he called, all the clocks in the house seemed to be broken because it took forever for the evening to come. I hadn't planned on watching the Raiders-Steelers game, but my father had it on, and I had time to kill, so I ended up watching it from the beginning of the fourth quarter. The score at that point was 14-0 in favor of the Steelers. I remembered the Raiders were supposed to win 21-17. My confidence in the prescient ability of my VCR was still high. The fact that the Raiders and the Steelers were playing each other at all was already powerful confirmation I had recorded a future event. The Raiders will score 3 touchdowns in the final quarter and win the game 21-17, I said to my father. He had been happy that the party had gone well, and I was feeling guilty for asking him not to come home since no one had ended up staying over. My father looked particularly tired, and I hoped his heart wasn't acting up. He shook his silver-covered head at my suggestion.
The way they're playing today, they'll be lucky to get in the end zone once, he said.
Do you want to bet on it? I asked. My father was interested. Although he was a Methodist minister, he loved Las Vegas, gambling of all kinds, particularly blackjack. He was pretty liberal when it came to the rules of the Lord. In fact, he once told me that he believed God had thrown the dice when he created the world.
How much? He asked.
$100.
You said you spent all your money on your VCR. How are you going to pay me if you lose?
I'm not going to lose.
I want an IOU.
I smiled. Fine, but if I win, I want the cash.
What kind of odds do you want?
What do you mean?
You are giving me an exact score, Rela. You deserve better than an even payment if you're correct. I'll give you 10-1 odds.
5-1.
10-1 is better for you. If I lose, I have to pay you $1,000.
5-1. I don't want to take all your money. I shook with anticipation. Let's see, what can I buy with $500?
Don't count your chickens before they hatch,
my father warned. He gestured to the TV.
The Steelers are deep in Raider territory again. They'll probably score.
A field goal, maybe. It'll be the last time they score. The Steelers scored 2 minutes later. A field goal. The Raiders got the ball. There were 12 minutes left in the game. They brought in a new quarterback, some young guy just out of college. Talented but green, the announcer said. The new quarterback didn't know that. He marched the Raiders down the field for a touchdown in 4 minutes, the last play being a tightly thrown spiral to a receiver in the corner of the end zone. Score, Steelers 17, Raiders 7.
They have to score twice more for you to win,
my father said.
They don't have time.
I think I'll get a new dress. No, 2 new dresses.
When's your young man supposed to be here?
He asked. 16 minutes and 32 seconds. My father smiled.
You really like this guy.
You'll love him. He's the smartest guy in the school. He's cute, too. A real hunk. My father laughed.
Sounds like love.
Then his face fell as he looked at the TV.
The Steelers just fumbled the ball on the kickoff. The Raiders recovered it on the Steelers' 10-yard line.
I rubbed my hands together in anticipation. Another touchdown coming up. I think I need a new coat for winter.
Do you have a coat?
My father asked seriously. I stared at the TV. I don't think so.
I'll buy you one.
I smiled faintly. I'll be able to get my own soon.
Rela?
Yes?
How are you doing?
Good.
Everything's all right at school?
Yes, I'm getting all A's.
You know I'm very proud of you.
I know. I'm very proud of you, too. All the work you do for the homeless. I wish I had time to help out.
Why don't you come down to the mission sometime?
It's hard, I said, with school and my job at the library. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my father watching me.
Is there anything you want to talk about, Rela?
He asked. No.
If you ever want to talk, I'm always here.
I know. The Raiders scored a touchdown a couple minutes after recovering the fumble. The Steelers got the ball back, but couldn't do anything with it. They had to kick off to the Raiders with 5 minutes left. The score was Raiders 14, Steelers 17. Once more, the Raiders began to march up the field, taking their time, using up the clock so their next score would be the last one. My father began to grow uncomfortable. "I can't believe this is happening," he said. "I should have a better stereo," I said. "New CDs." Christopher arrived when the Raiders were on the Steelers' 4-yard line, and there were 12 seconds left. I ran to the door, opened it, grabbed him by the arm, and dragged him into the living room to see the climactic play. My father was to be forgiven for hardly glancing at Christopher. "Here it goes," my father muttered. "All 500 of it," I agreed. "Who's playing?" Christopher asked. "Shh," we both said. The ball was hiked. The young green quarterback, who was looking more and more like Joe Montana, faked a handoff to his running back and rolled to the right. He had a man open in the corner of the end zone again. Zip! The pass was high, but the receiver could jump. Touchdown. Time expired. The game was over. 21-17. Exactly. "Yes!" I shouted, jumping off my seat. $500. My father buried his head in his hands. "I have a bona fide psychic living in my house." "Cash," I said to my father, slapping him on the back. "I want cash." "Did you two gamble on the game or what?" Christopher asked. "It wasn't a gamble," I said. "It was a sure thing." My father stared up at me with a strange expression on his face. He didn't care about the money, I knew. I wasn't even going to take it from him if he did offer to give it to me. It was all in fun. At least, that's what I thought. Yet there was fear on my father's face. "How did you know the score?" my father asked. I stopped bouncing around and shrugged. It was just a guess. He continued to watch me. "It was a hell of a guess," he said. Christopher drove us to the Oceanside restaurant, which was exquisite and situated on a hill directly above the crashing waves. Christopher had made reservations, and we were led to a table by the window. A candle flame shimmered between us. The sun had recently set over the watery horizon. I pleased Christopher by telling him he could order for me. "I don't care what I eat, as long as it's expensive," I said. "Then you should have lobster," he said with a smile. For the first time, I noticed how curious his smile was. Even though he was young, his smile seemed somehow ancient and sad. I told him what I thought. "I have the weight of the world on me," he joked. "You mean that?" He shrugged. "No." I nodded. "You feel as if you're destined for great things." "I just feel hungry, Rela." "I had a dream about you," I said suddenly. He was interested. I could tell because he gave me his cue. He always raised his left eyebrow when his interest was piqued, like Mr. Spock on Star Trek. "Oh? Tell me about it." "We were sitting together in what looked like your study. You were older. You had a computer beside you, and you were showing me an internal map of a brain." My voice faltered. "Go on," he said. I turned my head to the right, in the direction of the ocean. The window beside us was open, and I could feel the gentle tug of the salty breeze on my bare arms. I don't know why I suddenly turned to peer out into the darkening blue. A wave of cold swept over me, and I drew in a breath which only made me tremble. I swallowed heavily. "I can't remember any more," I said, lying. "Rela?" I forced a smile. "Yes?" "Are you all right?" "Yes. Actually, I wanted to tell you about that VCR I bought. It's amazing. Again, my voice faltered. Christopher waited for me to continue. I forced another smile. I wanted to tell him about what had happened. I'd been dying to, but all at once, I didn't want to. I just felt that it would be a mistake, a dangerous mistake. Yes, I sensed danger, but I wasn't sure if I sensed it emanating from him or from myself. It makes incredible tapes, I said finally. He visibly relaxed. Did it show up later on the tape? No, there was just the news. My voice sounded false. That's all there was. The waitress came and Christopher ordered, and we spoke about other things. School, college, music. I was surprised to learn he could play the piano. I was fairly accomplished on the instrument myself. My father would sometimes ask me to play him some Bach before he went to bed at night. He said it soothed his nerves. Christopher was impressed that I could read music. Where did you learn? He asked. My grandfather taught me, I said. My real one. As opposed to the fake one? I hesitated. I'm adopted. The revelation shocked him, as it had Stacy. So you know who your real parents are? He said. No. But you know your grandfather? He asked. Well, it's a long story. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. It's in the past, and it's boring. The waitress was bringing our food. I'd rather eat. So we ate our dinner, and I discovered a few small things about Christopher that reassured me that I could live happily ever after with him. He had good manners. He didn't chew with his mouth open or talk while he was chewing. Also, he wasn't in love with himself. He had confidence, extraordinary faith in his abilities, actually, for someone still in high school, but he quietly accepted his intelligence as a gift rather than as something to set him above other kids. He also seemed to be interested in me, a quality I prized in him above all others. Since it was Sunday night and we both had school and work the next day, Christopher took me straight home from the restaurant. I was disappointed at his sensible approach. I invited him in as we pulled into the driveway. He declined. I have to fix a couple of VCRs before I go to bed, he said. I think I'll try programming mine to tape something in the middle of the night, I said. The middle of tomorrow night, I thought. He reached out and touched my left shoulder. He hadn't touched me all night, not even my hand. I had fun tonight, he said. I smiled. It was magic. He laughed. I never know when you're kidding. I touched his hand. I'm not always, you know. I had a good time, too. We should get together again. I work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but otherwise I'm around. Maybe we could do something next weekend, he suggested. Yeah. Next weekend sounded like 1,000 years away. Little did I know I would feel like I had aged 1,000 years by the time Wednesday arrived. Or this Tuesday night would be good. He squeezed my shoulder, his smile broadening. I'll try to get free for Tuesday. What would you like to do? See a movie. 2 movies. How do you like your popcorn? Dry, plain, without butter. I paused. How do you like your girls? The same. I sneered. Plain like me, right? He kissed me then, suddenly, quickly. It was little more than a peck, but it made my entire life worthwhile. I like a little salt, he said, as he drew back. He looked so cute, kind of like a Christmas package that I wanted to tear the wrappings off to see what was inside. But I knew that would have to wait. Good night, Mr. Christopher, I said, opening my car door. Good night, girl genius. He saw my confusion. That's your nickname at school. He shrugged. You and I have the same one. I don't know if that means anything. I leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. I know. Chapter 6. Another nightmare Another horror, but I saw more than I felt. Had I felt everything, my mind would have split in two. Yet I suffered enough. God, yes. They took me out of the freezing bath. They, faceless shadows with strong arms. They carried me to the orange room filled with the cold steam. The reclining chair with the white sheets waited for me, but the sheets were not brand new as I had believed at first. They were already stained with drops of blood. The faceless figure set me down carefully. I felt the slight bump, yet I couldn't feel my skin. It seemed that I had only empty space to cover me. The chair was highly mechanized. Braces rose and then lowered to clamp down on my head and waist and ankles, immobilizing me. Motors whirled and the chair elongated into a bed as it slowly revolved in space. Finally, I was strapped and held in an upright position before a wide, blank computer screen. Then a large section of the back of the chair, or the bed, was removed, and I could feel icy fingers probe my spine. It was then I realized I was being made ready for an operation. Yet they gave me no anesthetic. They were just going to start cutting. I heard a high whining like that of a dentist's drill. The shadows at the edge of my vision moved closer. The sound went into my back. No pain, but blood began to drop onto the smooth white floor below me. My blood. I screamed, but made no sound. The computer screen came on. It showed an internal map of the spinal cord, millions of microscopic nerve fibers twisted together to form one living rope. Yet the cord looked dark. The miniature saw whined as it cut through the length of my back, and I could feel metal rods being inserted along it. Then there came a horrendous yank, followed by a moist tearing sound. They had torn my spine from my body. My screams blazed in my frozen soul like flames through a crystal cave. But the cave remained cold, and the shadows moved around in front of me. The computer screen switched to the map of my brain. Yes, it was my brain they had mapped, not Christopher's. I thought of him then, and I cursed him. Why hadn't he been able to spare me this agony? A steel blade glistened in the orange light before me. A gloved hand pressed it onto the top of my skull. This I could feel, the metal teeth fastening into my skin. They began to saw. The noise, the blood, the sorrow of it all. Yet my eyes, they must have left those intact. I watched as the eye of the computer screen took me deeper into my brain, even as the indifferent fingers probed the underlying layers of my gray tissue. Here it was also dark. No synapses was shooting molecular bolts of lightning. Not a single neuron glowed with the memory of days spent beneath the sun. The pathways of consciousness were as silent as my pleas for help. There was life, yet not life as I knew it. Not life as God had created it at the beginning of time. I saw a flash of silver. It was horrible. It was the seed of the curse. That I knew for a fact, even if the shadows did not. Yet it was also brilliant. The seed could reveal the secrets of the universe. It was my destiny to know them all. Jesus, I whispered as I sat upright in bed. My room was bright. The light was on. Had I forgotten to turn it off before sleeping? I never did that. I was in bed, dry, not sitting in the bathtub. I could hear my heart pounding, my labored breathing. Down the hall, my father snored peacefully. The house was otherwise silent. Before me, on the far side of the room, sat the dark screen of my TV. On top of it rested my VCR. I had set it to record the late news for the following day. I couldn't tell if the machine had done anything yet. I picked up the remote beside my bed and pushed the rewind button. I didn't expect anything to happen. I had put a new tape into the machine before going to bed, and if nothing had been recorded, the tape should have been at the beginning. Yet the tape began to rewind inside the machine. I remembered every detail from my dream. I trembled on my bed. A minute passed. The tape stopped rewinding. I pushed play. The news came on. A different announcer. A woman. Pretty. Great hair. "Good evening," she said. "In the news tonight, Saudi Arabia is protesting the recent loan guarantees to Israel, saying the Israelis have not contributed substantially to the peace negotiations going on in—" I listened for 15 minutes before I learned that I had recorded the news over 24 hours before it was to be broadcast. "It taped while I slept," I said aloud, "just like before." The baseball playoffs were on. The Oakland A's were playing the Toronto Blue Jays on Monday night. The announcer gave me the score of the game. I wrote it down and went back to sleep. No more dreams, for now. Chapter 7. I didn't go to school on Monday. I drove to Las Vegas instead. It took me 4 hours. I wanted to bet on the A's Blue Jays game, and I knew such gambling was illegal in Los Angeles. Since I didn't have a bookie, Vegas was my only choice. Before I left, I asked my father for the $500. He was surprised by my request, although he said he'd had every intention of honoring his bet. I promised him I'd give him the money back that evening. We had to drive to the bank to get the cash. I figured I'd need cash in Vegas. My father was a gem. He didn't even ask me what I needed the money for. He told me to keep it, that I had won it fair and square. The drive across the desert passed uneventfully. I had never been to Las Vegas before, and I must say I loved everything about it. The size of some of the hotels blew me away. I had heard good things about the Mirage, so I went there first. The casino was fairly empty when I entered. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I asked a woman refilling a slot machine where I could bet on the game, and she directed me to an area where there were numerous giant screen TVs with rows of empty seats set before them, sort of like a miniature theater, or better yet, arena. A number of horse races were presently being televised on the screens. There was a counter on the right side, boxed in with metal bars. A grizzly old man in a hotel uniform looked at me as I stepped up to the counter. "Looking for your parents?" he asked. I had on a black dress and had put my hair up to make me look older. I knew you had to be 21 to gamble in Vegas. I also knew the rule was seldom strictly enforced. "My daughter," I said smoothly and smiled. The man appraised me closely, and I returned the favor. He had so many lines on his face, he could have lain out in the sun with the cacti on his lunch breaks. He wasn't frail, though. The muscles under the skin on his bare arms were firm. His hair was dark. I could tell he dyed it, but still he had plenty of it. He pulled an unlit cigar from the corner of his mouth and nodded at my purse.
Are you here to place a bet?
He asked. Yes.
How old are you, young lady?
21.
He scowled. My ass.
I beamed. Your ass is 21 too? What month was it born? He sighed.
Oh, brother, do you have any ID?
How often do you ask for ID?
Never, but you've already pissed me off. Where's your driver's license?
I don't have one, but I have $500 in cash. I want to bet on tonight's baseball game. He looked more interested.
Do you like baseball?
I love it. I'm a big fan of the A's.
God was in a good mood the day he invented baseball,
the man said.
Are you here with your parents?
Nope. I'm sorry to say that they've both already died of old age. I put my arms on the countertop and leaned in closer toward him. I'm filthy rich, I said confidentially. You don't have to worry about me losing my money.
He snorted. I'm worried about losing my job. You have to be 21 to place a bet here.
I am 21. I withdrew the 5 $100 bills from my purse, letting him see them. You have my word of honor.
You want to put that all on the A's?
Nope, I'm betting against them. They're going to lose tonight 9-1. I want to wager that as the exact score, and I want odds.
I can tell you what the odds on that would be right now.
He turned to a chalkboard behind him that was lettered with columns and rows of numbers.
48-1.
I did a little mental arithmetic. Are you saying if I bet this $500 and win, you will pay me $24,000?
No, those are the straight odds. We will automatically take 10% off that amount. If you wager $500 that the Blue Jays will win 9-1 over the A's, and if you are right, we'll pay you $21,600.
I pushed the money forward. I'll take it. He pushed the money back.
That's a fool's bet.
I told you I'm a rich fool. He put his cigar back in his mouth.
What's your name?
Rela.
I'm Bob.
He offered me a hairy hand through the bars. Pleased to meet you, Bob. I told you not to worry about me or your job. If I lose, I lose. I won't make any fuss. If I win, it's pennies to me.
How did you come up with that score, Rela?
I'm psychic. He leaned forward. If he hadn't been so old, I would have thought he was the Marlboro Man himself. The smell of tobacco on his breath was incredible.
I've been in this business a long time, he said. I've met a lot of psychics. They usually end up at Gamblers Anonymous, flat broke. You're going to lose that $500 as sure as a snake spits in the desert. And you're not rich, Rela. I can tell by looking at you.
I was insulted. How can you tell?
Your shoes. It's always the shoes. Where did you get them? Kmart?
J.C. Penney's, on sale. Look, Bob, accept my bet. If I win, I'll buy you dinner. We can get drunk together.
Are you old enough to drink?
I held his eye. I have an inside tip on this game. I can't explain it to you. You just have to believe me. Take my bet and make a bet of your own. He may have been impressed with my earnestness. He sighed again and stared at my money.
You sure this won't break you?
He asked. I've got it covered. Bet with me. It'll be the best bet you ever made.
I'll have to go to another casino to place a bet on the game. I can't do it here.
For the first time, he regarded me seriously.
How good is your tip?
Good as gold. 9-1 will be the score.
You can't predict that. No one can.
I'm telling you the truth. Do I look crazy?
You sound crazy, Rela.
but then he relaxed and shrugged his shoulders.
Maybe I'll put 20 on it, just to please you.
Put 100 on it, I said firmly. He shook his head.
This town attracts all kinds.
Later, when the sun had set and the strip was ablaze with lights, I returned to the Mirage to collect my winnings. I figured Bob would be off work, but I found him waiting in one of the chairs arranged in front of the giant TV screens. He jumped up when he saw me.
I don't know why I did it, he said, but I put my whole paycheck on your hunch.
I was delighted. How much did you make? He was excited.
Almost as much as you did. Here to collect your money? You got that slip I made out for you?
Yeah, I didn't lose it. I fished it out of my pocket and handed it to him. He moved toward the counter.
I'm not on the job right now, but I'll see to it that you get your money promptly, he said.
He called for a young man in the back and handed him the slip and whispered something in his ear.
Bob turned to me. I assume you want cash?
Yes.
Will hundreds be okay?
Perfect. He gestured to the other guy, who disappeared into the back. Bob stepped close and put his arm around me. He had brushed his teeth or gargled since we talked earlier. His breath was mint fresh. He had on nice clothes, too.
How did you do it? He asked.
Can't tell you.
Come on.
Nope, that's your one tip. You can torture me and you won't get it out of me. He laughed.
I knew you were going to say that. Did you know I quit my job? I'm leaving town tonight, flying back to New York for a long holiday. That's home. Mind if we have that dinner another time?
That's fine. I have to drive back to LA. But you have to tell me, why did you listen to me? I never thought you'd risk so much. My question puzzled him. He took his arm from my shoulder and stepped back and got a funny look in his eye. He was happy, but he was afraid.
There's just something about you, Rela,
was all he would say.